Heading overseas, and US President-elect Donald Trump has met with French President Emmanuel Macron and the leader of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Paris. Joining me live is Washington Examiner White House correspondent Christian Datoc. Christian, always wonderful to have you on the program. This is a big meeting. Of course, many of the world leaders converging on Paris for the reopening of Notre Dame.
It is. It was a big weekend in Paris, not only for the city, but again, for the future of the war in Ukraine. And we've seen President Zelensky meet with President-elect Trump here stateside since the election has taken place. And obviously there are concerns, given the Trump camp sort of a rhetoric about the war and Donald Trump's past relationship with Vladimir Putin, that the conclusion of a war that Trump is pushing for could result in the loss of significant territory for Ukraine. That being said, both sides seem to believe that this was a productive meeting, and it's one of these indications that the world stage is moving on from President Biden and is ready to deal with Donald Trump for another 4 years.
How do you think that will go? Of course, it was an election campaign, much is said in campaigns. Donald Trump said this will stop in 24 hours. Obviously, that is rhetoric. What are your thoughts, Christian?
Well, Trump's bombast is part of the appeal of his foreign policy, at least to Republicans here in the U.S. And when you talk about how he has framed this war, the killing needs to stop. The U.S. and our allies need to stop sending blank checks, so to speak, to Ukraine. And there needs to be oversight for not only the funding, but the material and personnel support that we are lending the Ukrainians. Again, this is sort of a tactic we've seen from Trump many times over. He will go on Twitter or X or Truth Social, make a statement and sort of see how the dominoes fall and then adjust his own policy moving forward based on personal reaction. I do think the money spigot might be closed off a little bit compared to President Biden's handling of the war in Ukraine. But I doubt that Donald Trump will wholly abandon the country, given the investment the United States has put in over the last 3.5 years. And again, because of the way Vladimir Putin and not to mention some of his allies in Iran and North Korea have been, leading from the back, so to speak, in recent days. He is trying to end this war. We saw it during his first term in office. He wants to end these foreign conflicts, but I'm not sure that he will be able to do it as quickly as he is proposing, like you mentioned.
Pretty ordinary week for Joe Biden, of course, from a public perspective, and it's going to be interesting to see how it does impact on his legacy, pardoning his son Hunter, which I think a lot of people expected he would do, and then falling asleep on the job.
Well, that's Joe Biden's presidency in a nutshell, right? He told us for months that he would not pardon Hunter Biden for either his tax or gun charges, of which he is awaiting sentencing. That being said, over the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States, the president made this quick decision and then announced the pardon when he was already flying overseas for that visit to Angola. Again, when you think about Joe Biden, he wanted to restore these norms, not only with our foreign allies, but with way politics is covered and handled and consumed by the U.S. electorate here at home. I think he's objectively failed in that regard. I mean, he talked about how Donald Trump was a huge threat to democracy for 4 years, yet Trump won in a landslide election over Kamala Harris. This is the Joe Biden presidency. He is not going to have the legacy that he wants, and he will be known as a career politician who ended his term in office giving favors to his own family rather than people who have been wrongfully convicted or might be facing nonviolent drug offenses, which he has promised to reform, yet has not made good on that vow yet. Again, this is just Joe Biden in a nutshell.
And it is very interesting to watch as Donald Trump makes his appointments. It looks like Ron DeSantis is going to hit the streamline and be in there somewhere.
It's certainly a possibility. We do know in my conversations with Trump officials that DeSantis, despite the enmity between him and Trump during the Republican primary earlier this year, they appear to have repaired their relationship, certainly more than it seemed publicly over the last few months, considering DeSantis really didn't campaign for Trump at all after leaving the race. He is in consideration for the Secretary of Defense position should Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's first nominee, not make it through the confirmation process. He was also on the initial list to be the next Secretary of State, but of course that post will be filled with Marco Rubio, yet another one of these Florida Republicans, of which DeSantis and Trump are obviously the top dogs in that club. But again, this is something that we didn't exactly expect DeSantis being welcomed back into the fold, especially because he has past beef with Susie Wiles, Donald Trump's right-hand woman. She will be the incoming chief of staff at the White House and was the co-manager of Trump's campaign. DeSantis had her fired from her lobbying job back in 2018, 2019, and sort of accused her of leaking secrets from his inner circle to the press. I would be surprised if DeSantis gets a cabinet level post, but conservatives here in the United States want all of their warriors in this new administration, and Ron DeSantis is certainly on the top of that list.
Yeah, and with that military background, it sort of does make sense, doesn't it? That's going to be some interesting meetings, some interesting tea parties, I would suggest, with all these people coming together. Christian, it's always good to chat.
Take care, Tim.